Alright guys, HyDra again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. One of the most controversial changes of this roster mainly appeared without a doubt is the New York Subliners. After winning the World Championship, deciding to drop Priestahh, we might not ever fully know the story of what happened there behind the scenes. But Drazah, of course, who was on Thieves last year and stuck it out as the World Championship winning team, has given his thoughts on the matter and said that absolutely this is a big mistake from the Subliners. They might get some more firepower with Simp, but they will lose a lot by losing Priestahh in terms of culture and chemistry, and that is going to hold them back massively in the race to be the best team again next season. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Of course, speaking of the New York Subliners, we have to get into briefly this Crimsix and HyDra thing. I haven't got the chance to listen to it yet. I'm definitely looking forward to doing so. Like, it's a big podcast episode with Crim and HyDra, Burned Bridges, still just a fantastic podcast name, especially given Crimsix's history. And actually, we're going to discuss, I'll just share a clip here in a second, of this Crimsix Burned Bridges with some of these organizations. He obviously talked to HyDra about some of the stuff that's happened over the last few years, but he also gave some thoughts on stream while prepping for his, I think it's like the final tournament of the season in the racing simulation stuff. So I think they're flying out to Saudi Arabia here actually, which is pretty funny because like the Saudis obviously are doing all these esports tournaments. Whatever they can fund that will accept the money, they're going to do. And they have tried to do this Call of Duty in the past, but Activision have said no. Maybe Microsoft have a different opinion on that. I know that it was a censor a couple of years ago that said, look, the Saudis, I think it's Gamers 8, is it? One of the tournaments that they put on that were offering all this money, and Censor was like, look, I'm down to go and play for this cash, but Activision said no. So anyway, Crim I think is going to be out there soon enough, which is pretty interesting for him, but he was also talking about how the season ended after Vanguard. It was a strange end to the year in Vanguard, right, because he was on the Subliners. Clearly, they had to make a call, New York, whether they stuck with Crim or whether they stuck with HyDra. It didn't work between the two of them that season, and the choice, I think, was pretty obvious that, look, Crim, despite being the greatest of all time, he was reaching the end of his career. HyDra is clearly the next up talent. They made the correct call. They stuck with HyDra, and they said, look, Crim, we're going to have to part ways. But I was surprised that Crim didn't get another spot. Now, part of him probably didn't want to and wanted to step away, but it was a little bit of a, Crim went out with, he won an event in the Pro-Am, right? And he obviously made the grand finals of Major 4 and made that crazy one to get to the World Championship. But he did go up with a bit of a whimper given his status. Like, he kind of looked for opportunities. Nobody really wanted to play with him. What did he say? Like, Awakening, like my future lies with Awakening or something, because I think the decision was whether Crim was potentially going to go to Boston or not. And they said no. And then Crim just didn't really have an offer on the table, despite being Crimsix himself. Which is where people were wondering, is that really the full truth? Because it feels strange for a player in Crimsix's position to just like not really get any offers or interest. So Crim reckons that it's not the players that were like, no, I don't want to team with you anymore, Crim. Although he had burned a lot of bridges at that point, but someone's always going to want to team with Crim, you would think. He reckons it was the league owners and, you know, the team owners and stuff like this that were effectively blacklisting him from playing in the league.
Like, dude, do I need to make a video saying I got blacklisted by the league owners? Imagine if, like, the thing you cared about most, they're random people you had no idea, like, I didn't know their name, I don't know who they are, I know they just have deep pockets, they ask social media managers who should be on league teams, right? And then they basically told you, hey, everything you know in your life is now over because we deemed it. We wanted that to happen. We're blacklisting you from the league. They did it so secretively that people just wanted to say, oh, it's because he was no one wanted to team with him, he was a bad teammate, yada yada. Like, bro, if you believe that, you've been hoodwinked. But anyways, yeah, and then I have to deal with people just coming in and asking this question. Which I don't blame you for, by the way. I don't blame you for that. I don't blame anyone that comes in asking this.
So Crimsix says a lot of things. Whether a lot of them are actually true or not, it's kind of difficult to say. But I thought this was an interesting idea from Crim at the very least, that he was effectively blacklisted by some of these team owners. And also I think he's talked about this in relation to the league in general. Like, the league didn't like him, they wanted him out of the league, and because he was saying all this stuff and he wasn't a good influence and all this. So look, I don't know what's true or what's not true on this one, but it did strike me as somewhat strange that that Crim, like, of all the 12 teams, seemingly no one really wanted to play with him, apart from there was a couple of options that then fell through. Why did those options fall through, despite being Crimsix? And, I mean, he'd won an event in the previous season, had done actually quite a lot with the Subliners. Yes, there was all the massive drama on the flank with Crim versus HyDra, and he'd been into plenty of altercations over the last couple of years. We know that the Cold War team didn't go to plan on Dallas Empire, despite all the success he had during the Modern Warfare days with the same Dallas Empire roster, of course, plus Clay it was during that season before we went back to 4 versus 4. But yeah, I don't know what you guys think about that. Thought I'd share it regardless. Pretty entertaining, as is always the case when Crimsix is on broadcast. But let's talk about Drazah and his perspective on the Scrap Time episode on the New York Subliners. Drazah has a lot of experience in these particular situations, because we've seen Zuma over the last couple of weeks has mentioned that even FaZe, when FaZe have been cutting budgets, let's say maybe even after Cold War going into Vanguard, they're not cutting budgets massively, but there is some element there. I think even Drazah mentioned on the Flank episodes that he did briefly with these guys that OpTic offered him more money than FaZe did to join their roster, but he wanted to go for the winning opportunity rather than the money, at least as he sees it, going to that FaZe team instead. So FaZe probably aren't paying like insane salaries as maybe they used to, and they dropped their salaries, I think, a little bit after Cold War. The team obviously decided to stay together, so they took a pay cut between them so they could make that happen and continue as a roster going into the upcoming season. Thieves, I'm almost certain, did the same thing after last year's World Championship win in 2022. They win champs. There was, I think, discussions before that event whether Envoy might go elsewhere, but they wanted to stick it out after they won, obviously. But they had to take a pay cut to achieve that because Thieves just didn't have the budget to support it. They did exactly that. They took the pay cut, and it, to be honest, worked out for Thieves. Surprisingly so. It wasn't a good season for Thieves, like definitely by their standards. Given the success their team had had prior, it wasn't a good year. But they did win an event. They did make a couple of finals, which is much better than most World Championship winning teams ever do in the following season. Drazah's point of view, therefore, looking at this whole Subliners Priestahh situation, is that this is a big mistake in his eyes. Getting rid of Priestahh in this way, not finding a way to resolve the issue, because despite what all those guys say on Twitter, oh, I love you, bro, like, thanks Priestahh for all the times, I hope we can team up again and all this stuff. Like, it's quite clear, I think at least, that if they really wanted him to stay, they could have found a way for him to stay. Even if the organization wanted him gone, if HyDra wanted him to stay, I'm sure, like, you know, I'm sure they could have found a way. And that's Drazah's point of view, but they didn't. So in part, they wanted to drop him. Clearly, that seems clear enough. But is it a major error?
But if there was any way, I don't see a world where they shouldn't have been able to keep that team. There should have been money off people's salaries, and whatever you can do to get that team, you stay with that team. They proved that they were the best team of the year. They won 3 tournaments, and there's no reason that they should not be the same team as it was. But I think Dante's a good pickup, especially for the flexes out right now. I think that he will come in, and I think that they will still be really good. I just don't think that they're going to have the same form or composure or team chem that they had, and I think this is a big mistake out of New York.
So I do wonder whether we are going to get at some point a message from Priestahh about this, because he did say that he had some sort of video prepared on the subject here, so we might see it. I mean, as of recording, there's nothing yet, but it might come out today. I think he said a couple of days ago that on the 21st, maybe he was going to release it, of course. The 21st has come and gone, so maybe he's editing some things and wants to take some things out from his perspective, and maybe he just doesn't feel a rush to release this video, which is also fair enough. But he does want to explain more of the process that happened, just so people can understand what went on from his point of view behind the scenes. But yeah, Priestahh, I mean, it's so rare that we see anything like this, and it might not happen again for a very long time. You've got to think that over the last decade of there being COD World Championships, no team has ever voluntarily made a decision like this to make a move. Now, it's been a crazy rostermania, right? That's very clear. A lot of bigger name players have been free agents, which definitely pushes teams towards making big, bold decisions, which is exactly what they've decided to do. But Drazah has experience with going down a decision like this, and you'd think that if there was any team that would say, well, you know, I can understand why you'd want to do that, it's a team that won champs, then it didn't have a great year, which, okay, Thieves won, but they didn't really have a great year, let's be honest, and now they've blown it up completely. You'd thought Drazah might actually say, you know what, fair enough. They might think that, well, they're not going to do as well the next year, and therefore they want to make a change. But Drazah's like, no, definitely you want to stick it out as a team. You know the ceiling you can get to, and also next year's game, is likely to be very similar to this year's game. Quite often you'll find that certain players that were just really good at the previous title, and maybe this is the case for Kenny to some degree, was very good at the end of Vanguard, wasn't quite the same player in Modern Warfare 2, and the team does really thrive off Kenny when he's playing well at that Los Angeles Thieves roster. So without Kenny being quite as good at that game, then they fall off a bit, right? So maybe there's a point to say, well, if you stick it out as a team, often you'll just get worse, because it's quite likely that if you won the World Championship on one game, then your players were like better than they usually are at that specific title, and therefore next year it's likely that they're going to be somewhat regression to the mean in some sense, so therefore you're likely to be a little bit worse. Maybe that's a part of it, but next year's game is probably going to be this year's game with a couple of tweaks, like the mini-map, like the Dead Silence. Hopefully it's going to play very similar, we think at least. So you could argue that's even more reason to stick it out as a roster when you've just won the World Championship and you know that your team works well on that type of game. But Thieves did, in fairness, win Major 4 this year, which broke the champs curse. It's never been done before that a team that wins champs wins another tournament in the next season. So Subliners might be looking at this and thinking, well, even if you call this the champs curse or you don't, it's very rare a team that wins champs for various reasons. Probably the main reason is that after you win champs, all the teams that aren't your team make changes to beat your team. And that's usually how it goes. And therefore, I mean, it happened with even FaZe after the Cold War season. Pretty much all the teams tried to build squads to beat FaZe. OpTic did, Surge did, and what do you know, when they matched up in finals, they would typically beat FaZe. Obviously that year was a bit of a disaster for FaZe in their grand finals records, but it seemed to work. Definitely Drazah, I think, is correct though on the risk side of this, getting Sib, and it's kind of funny that he just says, yeah, they're getting Sib. I mean, it's not confirmed, at least as of recording the video, but we know that it's going to happen at this point because there really are just no other options remaining for that roster, and they wanted Sib a couple of years ago and they couldn't get him at the time, so now they're going to get him into the roster. But I think there's just a lot of risk involved there. The coaching staff on Subliners is great. I think they can make this work, but yeah, just removing a player that just won the World Championship is such a big risk, and I guess we'll see over time. Like, I wonder what will qualify a move like this as a mistake, because the other teams I think around them have got better anyway. So if they don't win any events, then I guess it will go down as a mistake. If they still win one event, then maybe it won't. But and if they do any more than that, then it's probably been a good move, because the competition around Subliners I think has only got better going forward. There was also this from Nameless the other day that I thought was kind of interesting. Which CDL Pro is this? I know that many have even put Priestahh into this category because doesn't maybe get the recognition even by pro players that maybe he deserves. The first player actually that came to mind when I saw this was technically he was a CDL Pro briefly on the London Royal Ravens right at the start of the CDL, but it was Jerd. Jerd was a phenomenal talent, one of the most talented players that I've ever seen. His point of view, like when you watch his onboard, it just looks absolutely spectacular, and was just a phenomenal player from back in the Black Ops 2 days. I'm sure many pro players would say, you know what, yeah, Jerd was disgusting, and probably, I don't think he got the recognition that he deserved, but just how good he was. And it's the thing with, you know, some European players and players on those teams don't win that many events, especially during those periods, and therefore don't, you know, maybe get the recognition that they deserved in terms of the talent. I'm looking at this from a pure talent perspective rather than accolades and stuff like this. I also think that Slasher in part falls into this, because I've seen people say, oh, like the Slasher guy, he's got to go to Vegas or something, but you know, he's a really good melee AR. He's like borderline top 10 player of all time, one of the top 3, top 4 ARs of the last several years, if not all time, to be honest. Won a world championship, but still seems to be a little bit underrated, and people are looking at Boston saying, oh no, Slasher's not it, so like he's not going to be able to slay hard enough. I'm like, I'm not so sure about that, given his tenure in Call of Duty. But very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.